Gen Z's newest workplace trend is career catfishing.
Good grief.
And this is their way of demonstrating power over corporate employers. This is a demonstration of their autonomy in the corporate world. This basically means that they go on the job hunt and submit applications, eventually get a job offer, and then don't show up to the job on the first day. And it's to troll people who are working in HR departments to make their lives more difficult.
Considering everything
It's an act of protest.
I've read lately about how many interviews it takes to get some jobs. Like, it's not like you go in for one interview and then you're hired. Like, a lot of these things, you got to do a phone interview and then an in-person interview and then a second in-person interview.
Yeah.
To do that and then not show up for the job is bonkers.
Especially in this economy, like, don't you want a job? Like, we need money, you know? So I don't really understand how they're able to do this. But yeah, it's an act of protest. Gen Z is ditching company loyalty for flexibility, as they call it. Career catfishing. After drudging through the exasperating job hunting process, which includes submitting dozens of lengthy applications, suffering through endless rounds of interviews, and anxiously awaiting updates from hiring managers, Gen Zers are catfishing jobs to prove that they have all the power, not the employers. This says 1 in 3 Gen Z, 34% of Gen Z, have accepted a job offer but not shown up on their first day without communicating with the new employer, otherwise known as career catfishing.
What's weird about this is they're saying that they have the power and not the employer. The problem is, if you had to go through lengthy interviews, that means that there was a bunch of other candidates, which means that the employer has all the choice in the world. You're just being annoying because they still have the power to hire someone else, and you'll end up costing them a couple of days worth of work, and the interviewer will just move on to the next candidate.
Well, more so, they screwed over the other people who were genuinely looking for a job.
Yep.
This says also 1 in 4 millennials have career catfished, compared to 11% of Gen X and 7% of boomers.
Well, those millennials are just trying to be hip like their Gen Z counterparts because they refuse to grow up.
38% of Gen Z have ghosted their employer, just disappearing from a job without formally resigning, compared to 26% of millennials, 15% of Gen X, and 10% of baby boomers. I'm actually surprised that the number is that high for any of them.
Yeah.
Like,
I've lucked out of jobs.
you do need a reference,
I mean,
just selfishly speaking.
I mean, it depends on how long you've been there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if the idea here is that you're not going to use them as a reference, feel free to leave it all you want. You're just going to inconvenience a bunch of people. But if you do that, you're inconveniencing the people on the floor that day, not necessarily HR.
Right, but they're framing
their,
this ironically as some kind of Marxist revolutionary act, throwing up their fist in the air and, you know, showing the bourgeoisie who's boss.
that's just that's so stupid.
There's a 20 there.
Just because I'm free?
Says, I'm all for America following other countries' examples. You don't work, you don't eat. Do away with all these government handouts. These young bloods don't know what real struggle is.
I mean, I would be tempted to say they understand that they're never going to own homes and are locked out of opportunities that the baby boomers had, so they just say, F it.
Also,
I'm not going to work hard.
A person's identity being directly tied to their professional life is kind of a relic of the past. When it's tied to a specific company, right? Like your grandparents and even your parents, depending on how old you were, worked at the same job for 20 to 30 years and then retired. That is not really the dominant culture anymore. Most people, I think it was every 5 years, people are switching jobs, almost regardless of their age bracket. So there isn't that idea of loyalty to a brand anymore. Plus, we live in the age of the gig economy, where a lot of people, they can't get by on whatever they're making at their regular job anyways. They have to DoorDash. They have to drive an Uber. There is no loyalty there. But what we're talking about in this case is not about loyalty. It's just about being a menace to people.
Yeah, for no reason.
For no reason.
Other than spite. And with all of these trends, with all of these terms like quiet quitting, quiet vacationing, bare minimum Mondays, which basically means doing as little as possible on Mondays. You see that Gen Z is generally the most likely to be unprofessional. And as you go in order from the generations, the boomers are the most likely to actually show up and do the work, at least self-reportedly.
Yeah.
And they say, unlike older colleagues, Gen Zers are more concerned about prioritizing their personal needs and goals than kowtowing to the demands of corporate culture.
I also like that. I think that's funny because for millennials, when they were young, there was definitely a fight the man type of sentiment that gave way to a typical corporate culture.
They say mental health support is important to 74% of Gen Z and 72% of millennials, compared to 56% of Gen X and 46% of baby boomers.
Millennials and Gen Z are massively dealing with depression and mental illness and et cetera, and they're the ones that are like, we need help with our mental illness and with our depression, and Gen X and boomers are just like, well, we're just going to go to work and do something. And they're the ones that don't say, hey, I have all these mental illness problems.
Right.
Maybe they're connected.
Could be a correlation there. Just take a wild guess. Thank you. But like, what do you expect your employer to do about your depression? Like, where's
like when we talk about
what do you think your job is going to do to support your mental health?
It's like when we talk about the actors who say the studio should have done more to help the actors with their mental health struggles from the people yelling at them. It's like, what are they supposed to do? Outside of like what, hiring you a therapist? What are they supposed to do?
69% of Gen Z say that DEI initiatives in their workplace are important to them.
Oh, sick.
63% of millennials compared to 48% of Gen X and 40% of baby boomers.
That just proves to you that none of them actually know what that term endears if the numbers are that high at all around the board.
And here you see the victim mentality at play. 45% of Gen Z employees report being discriminated against based on physical appearance.
Something that likely can't be proven, but I was treated poorly at work, therefore it must have been because of my race. Of course, there would be the specific examples where somebody could have been, discriminated against based on, or somebody could have spoken ill of you and mentioned your race or your gender. But unless that's proven, unless somebody actually like said a slur to you, then the idea is just somebody was mean to me and I happen to be a woman. Somebody was mean to me. I happen to be of a different race than them.
Yeah.
It must be why.
It must be
that because
We have a 20 from Brian Bledsoe. Just like other tech, this will only improve over time. These robots are expensive now, but once the price is lower to the general public, then it's game over, at least for a time, until we truly value human connection again. Yeah, I believe, perhaps naively, that the age of robots taking over our homes and our workplaces is going to force people to make the decision to prioritize human connection. 65% of... Actually, I'm going to leave this as an open question. I want to know your answer, Phil. Which generation do you think is most likely to admit that they're doing the bare minimum for their job?
Admit. My gut says Gen Z because there's less stigma attached to not being a high achiever for them. If you're willing to say, I quiet quit, and also be valorized by your social group when you say, I quiet quit, or I don't do this, etc. You get valorized by the people around you for saying those things and doing those kind of things and hating, capitalism, etc. So I'm guessing it would be Gen Z, but
It's the millennials.
Is it the millennials?
The millennials were most likely to admit to consciously doing the bare minimum required for their job.
It is the correct
AKA
position to hate millennials.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised that Gen Z wasn't the top of the pile for that. They were second, but not surprised about these other stats. 59% of Gen Z admit to performing tasks just to appear productive in the workplace, known as faux-ductivity.
Well, I mean, that's actually a huge debate that people have. You could probably find it on like a LinkedIn message board right now about should your job be the required 8 hours a day, or should it be a required set of tasks that you have to do? And if that takes 8 hours, good, great. But if it doesn't, you should be able to get out of there sooner. Right?
Can we just stop making fake, stupid names?
No, they have to name everything.
Productivity.
It has to be hashtagable, so it has to have a name.
Okay, and then 2 in 3 of millennials and Gen Z admit that they participate in bare minimum Mondays, the practice of starting the week with the most low effort to avoid burnout. They probably report the most burnout despite working the least.
Yeah.
Ironically. I don't know. This is like, I understand it. I understand why they don't take pride in their work, because they don't believe, probably justifiably so, that it will open up upward mobility for them.
Well, nobody feels any sense that like if I put in the work, I'm going to get something out of it anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard to motivate somebody if they don't feel like that there's an upward trajectory for them. That's why it's funny when people talk about, I was telling you the thread that I was reading the other day about the kid. It was like 22-year-old makes $70,000 a year at UPS. And somebody called it a dead end job. And somebody's like, well, no, if he's 22, he's on track to be a driver, which makes him well over $100,000 a year. And UPS has a great retirement package. But most of corporate America, you know, in the jobs that would be considered more glamorous, meaning one of those laptop jobs that everybody wants, but nobody can get. They don't have, a lot of them don't have that same level of upward mobility because they hire from outside the company.
Right.
They don't, you know, they don't promote from within these days. They headhunt and search from outside the company for escalating positions.
That's also why so many millennials say they're still the youngest people in their workplace. Like Gen Z is just not getting considered for entry-level jobs anymore.
Well, when you don't show up for the first day of work, that can prevent you from getting hired.
Well, it's insane the amount of headlines that come out that just say like, breaking news, Gen Z is stupid and annoying. Like, it's not exactly helping their case, and they're getting painted with a broad brush. I think a lot of them probably feel that they wouldn't be rewarded or would, in fact, be punished for hard work.
Yeah.
So I understand where this resentful mentality is coming from.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good for them spiritually to approach work this way.
No, and it's good.
It's just the idea of approaching work like this is so detrimental to overall happiness because, you know, you're not going to be happy if you just sit on your butt and drink margaritas all day or drink, you know, if you listen, I used to drink a lot. And the happiest times in my life are not the times when I was just sitting around drunk all day. That's just not it. It's just not. And I had the opportunity to do that. I could, you know, when we get off tour, I could sit at home and be drunk for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row, straight every single day, morning to night if I wanted to. That's not what makes you happy. Going and doing things and succeeding at things in life is what makes you happy. So like, the idea that every day should just be a day off, that's why the reason that people work, even when they're independently wealthy, is because that's what brings us joy and fulfillment, not sitting around drinking all day.
I do think that there's a market to be had, and I've spoken to, I forget who I was speaking to about that, where their whole job was as a consultant liaising with bigger companies on how to court and motivate Gen Z employees, because they're trying to, a lot of these corporations are saying like, look, eventually we're going to have to get into a new pool of candidates. Everyone's going to age out, and the values of someone in Gen Z, because of how they've been raised, because of the economy in which they've been raised, the values of the culture they were raised in are different from that of the millennials and those come before them. Some of these corporations are hiring consultants to help find ways to bridge the communication gap between your boomer boss and your Gen Z hires.
But that's kind of insane that they're planning to cater to them, you know? Like,
I mean, it's for the. I mean, to them, it's like why would you acquiesce to terrorists, right? But
like,
the point is
like
like
gentle parenting, but like in the workplace.
But
like,
if it yields strong results if you hire, like if you're that consultant, right? And you can point to these examples, like, look, this company brought me in, we raised their hire number by this much, and their productivity went through the roof. If you can point to, strong examples of it working, why not? It's just that it's a lot easier as a millennial, a Gen Xer and beyond to just make fun of Gen Z because of how different they are from their previous generations.
I know millennials got so much hate for being the lazy snowflake generation, but Gen Z is getting it so much more intensely.
And I kind of like, I'm in the same boat as Phil, not about the ability to sit around for 3 weeks at a time and do nothing if I wanted to, but I don't feel like maybe it's tied to being in recovery, but extended periods of time where I'm not doing anything are horrible for my health. They're horrible for my mental state. And to the point where it's probably a bad thing for me at points where you do have to learn to be able to sit with yourself and not do, a certain amount of like aimlessness is actually good because it helps your body recalibrate. But I don't do that well. Like,
that's what like
by Sunday, I'm
meditation
desperate to be. By Sunday, I'm desperate to be back at work because and we stay busy on the weekends. But if I wasn't going out and doing things, that's why skating was always so important to me. It was that it kept me busy, it kept me focused, it gave me tangible goals to reach. And human beings are generally happier when they have tangible goals to reach. Now, depression can get in the way of that. That is for sure. Like if you're depressed, that can sometimes put a block between you and your ability to focus on completing things like that, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. Mm-hmm. And that's not to denigrate Gen Z in that case. Like I said, I think that there's a communication gap here between how the previous generations think, how corporations are run by those from previous generations that don't understand how newer workers think and feel. In a capitalist sense, like what the having to cater to them does suck, but if it benefits your bottom line, it's just an expense that you have to deem necessary.
True. So. Yeah, well said.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.